Aloha, welcome to the Groundswell Origins Podcast, where I connect you to outstanding humans and sustainable ideas. I'm your host, Scott Martin, and today we have an incredible sustainable thinker, the one and only Brian Piper, who is the co-author of the second edition of Epic Content Marketing with Joe Paluzzi. And we kind of cover off a whole spectrum of things. First of all, some of the high-level concepts and ideas from the book. And then secondly, we kind of talk about the bridge into community and where things are going next. And as well, the impacts of content marketing and your business with AI. So we cover like such an incredible component of content marketing, of what's going on with AI and how to be competitive in this landscape. Brian is such a calm, collect, and such a great human. I know that you're just going to love this episode. So without further ado, let's paddle in. All right. We are here with the one and only Brian Piper. Welcome.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, it's such an interesting thing to have you on the show. There's so many different things I want to talk about, but the first one I'm just curious about is, how did you go from just instantly becoming like a superstar working with Joe Paluzzi?
Well, it wasn't
with a brand new book. Sorry,
it wasn't exactly an instant process. It was a long process. So I actually read the first edition of Epic Content Marketing back in 2014. I was a website developer developing e-learning courses for a defense contracting company at the time, and read the book and was just amazed. I was like, this, you can tell stories and gain people's trust, and then eventually, convert them into a community that will purchase things from you and take recommendations from you. And I just thought that was an amazing convention to use, a great strategy to use. So I went right down to the vice president of marketing at the company I was working at and said, you need to hire me to do your digital marketing. And as part of, website development, I wasn't the best website developer. I wasn't passionate about it, so a lot of times they'd stick me on doing SEO. So I said, hire me to do your digital managing, digital marketing, hired me in, gave me an opportunity, started doing a bunch of SEO, started looking at content strategy. We doubled our organic traffic in the first year. So that led to a lot of other opportunities within that organization. And then a couple of years later, I got hired by the University of Rochester to do content strategy, data analytics. And within the first 2 weeks of starting that job, that was back in 2017, I convinced them to send me to Content Marketing World. So I tracked Joe down the first year. I took a selfie with him. I thanked him for writing the book, changing my career path, getting me into a field that I was passionate about. And then I did the same thing every year. I would stalk him at Content Marketing World and take a selfie with him and tell him the same story. And eventually he started recognizing me. And then that turned into, I started doing the same thing at the University of Rochester. We doubled our organic traffic the first year for the central communications team. Then they kind of pushed me out all over the institution to help our medical center, our business school, our music school do the same thing. I taught SEO workshops, and that led me to going to these industry conferences and presenting there, doing workshops there, which led me to presenting at Content Marketing World in 2020 virtually, and then in person in 2021. And it was during that 2021 conference where I got to spend a lot more time with Joe. We connected and we talked a lot. And I kept asking him about, a second edition of Epic. And so finally, then 2 weeks after the conference, we were in a Slack channel. He was talking about his second edition of Content Inc. We were doing a book club review of that. There were probably only 5 people in the room. And I, sent a message saying, when are you going to do second edition of Epic? And he said, well, co-author it with me and I'll do it. So I said, yes, absolutely, I will. And, actually at first I was like, oh, that's great. I might take you up on that. And then the next day I sent him an email and I said, yeah, I will absolutely do that if you're game. So he wasn't sure at first because the first edition was really focused on content marketers at brands, and his new business, The Tilt, is all focused on content entrepreneurs. And I said, no, we can make this work. There's so much crossover. There's so many similarities. We can get influencers from both of those arenas to come together and talk about their experiences. So it was a wonderful process. It was just great getting to work with him on this. And then in the course of writing the book, getting to interview so many, fantastic influencers and content marketers was just, definitely transformational for my career. I've always done content marketing and optimization for big companies, big institutions, do some consulting with other higher ed institutions. And so this really kind of turbocharged my personal brand development. So it's been quite a journey.
And of course, with the godfather of content marketing, like that is like the textbook for me. That and Content Inc. And plus, he's like one of the funnest, lighthearted guys in the world. He's so funny. Like when I do a podcast with him, I think I've done 2 or 3, and it just makes me laugh because he's just so fun.
Yeah, he's just a nice, genuine person. I mean, after selling, Content Marketing Institute, doesn't really have to do any of this, but he really likes it. He really likes helping content entrepreneurs and creators figure out how to, grow their business and grow an audience. And he's just so good at it. I'm, super grateful that he got back into the industry after selling CMI. He took a year sabbatical and just kind of disconnected and went off and traveled, spent time with his family. But really glad that COVID kind of encouraged him to get back because he had so many people asking him about, his Content Inc. structure and plan. So, and he's always just, yeah, I'm next week, I'm going to his Creator Economy Expo conference and just really looking forward to seeing him. And he just spends all of his time there interacting with everybody and talking with people. He's just, great person.
He's that kind of guy. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know he's
Yeah.
amazing. So it's like he's somebody that like as your mentor virtually, like maybe as an author. Now you get to work with them. What was so you mentioned like the now you kind of brought in some of the content, like it updated it with new content creators. What else could someone expect as a major difference between both issues?
Yeah, I mean, so when we first started looking at it, we were talking, we were like, okay, this has been 10 years, everything must have changed. Let's just throw it all out and start all over again. So we really started from the ground up. Let's build the framework and we'll talk about, you know, content marketing mission statement and content marketing strategy. All of that was in the first edition. So we really went back to the first edition and we pulled out those pieces that still applied. We updated them with, current statistics and new case studies. And that was about a third, the first third of the book. And then the second third of the book really gets into, more details about using your data and really looking at your channels that are available and looking at all the new content options that we have now that didn't exist back then. And then the final third of the book, we jump into, kind of the future of content marketing. We talk about communities and, converting super fans. Got to talk to Pat Flynn about that. Um, and David Siegel from Meetup, talking about the importance of building these communities and establishing this trust. And then we got into, Web3 and AI and how technology is beginning to change the content marketing landscape. And then we ended off with, just bunch of content marketers, content entrepreneurs talking about what they thought the future of content marketing was going to look like. So, it really is a comprehensive guide to everything from the fundamentals and the basics of content marketing all the way to, how you can integrate data and the current technology and kind of social implications for content marketing.
That's amazing. That's I mean, like anyone that's listening, this is like the Bible in my mind, like one of the on the shelf, like needs to be there. What would be like if you could kind of like maybe pull out what from the difference between the two. Now you've told us some of the structures. What was something that really surprised you that you learned in the process that kind of maybe would change the trajectory that someone listening to you would be like, wow, like I never really thought that, especially like with the new tech. We'll get into the Web3 thing maybe in a bit, but outside of that.
Yeah, and Joe and I have talked about this before. Once we got all done with the book, things that surprised us that we weren't expecting. And I think the thing that I focus on the most and has really kind of worked its way into all of my processes is this idea of community and the importance of community. I think especially with, all the AI content that we're seeing, all the deep fakes that are out there, people are looking for that human connection. They're looking to get their information from a source that they know they can trust and rely on and that has their best interests at heart. We're trying to solve real problems for real people. So community, super fans, that whole idea is something I'm very passionate about. I think
Can
it's
you describe that? What's a community super fan?
so yeah, when you're first building, as a creator, as a content entrepreneur, as a content marketer for a brand, the first thing you try to do is grow an audience. You're just trying to get your message out there, getting people to consume your message. And, you're going for those, the kind of the high value, you know, um, metrics that, the likes, the reach, things like that, the vanity metrics that don't really have a lot of impact on your brand, but you're trying to grow your audience. You're trying to build the amount of people who see your message. And then out of those people, you're going to find people who connect with that message, who that really resonates for. You're helping solve their problems. They're really your target audience. And those people are going to start to engage more. And it's really that engagement that defines the difference between an audience and a community. So those people are going to start coming into your community. They're going to start looking for other places to find your content. So they're going to start, they're going to subscribe to your newsletter. They're going to follow you on all the different social platforms you're on. They're going to look for other ways to connect with you and engage with you. And then the next step up from that is the super fans. And Pat Flynn's book, Super Fans, is all about, this process of converting people from an audience to a community to super fans. And super fans really become your advocates. They share your message with their community. They engage with all of your content. They're active in any events, webinars, anything like that. Any chance that they get to interact with you, to connect with you, that's where you really get those super fans. And you'll find them, they will come into your community and they will volunteer their time to help you do things and, to solve problems for you. So it's really where you get to, now you have that switch in you're helping them, you're giving them, you're building that trust. And then eventually they want to give back because they feel like you have given them all of this opportunity, created all of this, knowledge sharing that you're just giving to them without expecting anything in return. And then eventually they want to, reciprocate. And I think, that for me was the thing that stood out. And I think for Joe, he was saying, the thing that really stood out for him was the case studies that we included in the book. Because in the first edition, it was, most of it was theoretical. He had a handful of case studies in there, river pools and spas and Aero Electronics, a couple other ones. But they were just really at the beginning of starting to do content marketing. And then in the second edition, we have some just amazing, Cleveland Clinic, Salesforce, Sweet Farm, some great case studies of people who have really leveraged content marketing and are doing it right. They're building, an entire department, structuring their entire business around it, changing their entire business model. So I think that's what really hit him the most about, what's changed in 10 years.
Now, you talked about content marketing. Most people think that's like outbound, right? And then we say community, that's sort of like inbound or in an area, like how does content marketing apply to a community?
Yeah, and content marketing is really kind of the fundamental. It's like the top of funnel for building a community because really what you're looking to do with content marketing is you're putting out valuable, useful content that's helping your users solve their problems, right? And what that does is that builds that trust. It gets them to, understand that you are an expert, you're a source, you're someone that they can come to when they have problems in this area. And once they keep coming back to your content over and over, then they're going to, they're going to start thinking, this is someone I want to be connected with who can help me out all the time in my job, and I can get, information from them and resources from them. So then that way, when you start building a community, those are the people that you reach out to. Those are the people who are going to come into your community and have those deeper conversations, those meaningful conversations, and connect with you as a real person, not just as a resource for their content marketing questions, because then they can come to you with their business questions. And, a lot of times in these communities, we'll get into personal issues that people are having that tie into, I mean, we know how everything is related in our lives. Our personal lives tie directly into our business lives in so many situations. So, really, if you're looking at, a traditional marketing funnel, that community is really near the bottom of the funnel. And your content marketing, the content that you put out and distribute, that's really, top of funnel in a lot of instances.
Now, is there not room for content marketing inside the community? Because I feel like myself, I'm actually almost using content marketing internally to migrate the audience to from free to paid, and then now into community paid. Does that make sense? I'm kind of like, and I'm using content as opposed to sales. Like I'm kind of using that methodology of the drip drip. What's sort of your take on that? What's been your experience, or does the book cover that at all?
Yeah, actually, we have a whole section that talks about, it's the subscriber hierarchy is what we call it. So,
Okay.
it's very much that content funnel, and you do need content at each level of the funnel, at each stage of that hierarchy, but it's the level of commitment that that content takes, that will make it, appropriate for that level. So, like, the lowest level of the content funnel is a lot of your social channels where people can just go and consume and see, and they don't have to really interact much. And then eventually, the highest level of that is that membership. It's people within your community who want to become more active, more engaged, and, really pull the most out of that creator.
That's beautiful. Like, I think, community. I did an interview with Mark, who wrote "Belong to the Brand,"
Great book. Yeah.
and his statement. It's like the last great marketing strategy, and now that AI's come on, I think he's like 1,000,000% correct.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm in his, Rise community, and we just collaborated on a book, the most amazing marketing book ever. He had
I saw it.
36 people all come together to work on this, and he, the key for running a community the way that he has done it is he is involved in every aspect. He is there. When you go in there and post a question, he's going to, come in and respond to you, and you can engage with him. And yeah, I think definitely community for brands, for creators. I think that's going to be, and I'm seeing it more and more in education, and especially in higher education. We need to look for these opportunities to create these areas where people can connect to other people, because so much of our society does not provide those opportunities. And social media creates a lot of opportunities to divide people. Um, I think we're going to see more and more brands digging into communities.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of the private virtual communities, just because of social media algorithm, lack of control. I mean, Joe talks about it endlessly about, don't build your house on rented land. And it's called Rally. He did a Web3 community, right?
Yep.
With Rally. And were you on that as well, the Rally?
I was not on Rally. I was part of Joe's, yes, Tilt community and Tilt
Yeah.
Coin, and Mark. That's where he kind of started his, Discord community, was through the Rally platform. I thought it was, a brilliant idea, the technology behind it. I'm a huge proponent of the blockchain technology. It's just different implementations and some of the way that a lot of these become centralized structures in what is supposed to be a very decentralized environment, just makes it difficult for them to actually work the way that they should work. So,
Yeah, it's very interesting, the the challenges that have been coming up in Web3 with the idea of total blockchain, the promise of it, but yet if there's some sort of filter or control mechanism, then it actually has more room for manipulation than anything else, right?
Yeah.
And but people, if they buy into the fact that it's going to be completely transparent, that's what I think is creating a lot of problems right now, and you're seeing a lot of disruption in the space.
Yeah, I was just 2 weeks ago. I was at NFT NYC, and so it's changed so much in the last 2 years. That whole conference, the feel, the people that are there, the vendors that are there, the sponsors. It has turned much more towards real practical use cases. There were a ton of use cases there in fashion industry and the gaming industry. But there were a lot of other brands there, a lot of higher education and just across the entire education landscape, people looking for different ways to use NFTs as, diplomas, curriculums, certificates, proof of knowledge that you could just put into your digital resume that would be verifiable, and you could use those to go out and get a job instead of having to say, "Here's my diploma from a university," or, I put on my LinkedIn that I went to Harvard, even though 80% of the people on LinkedIn who said they went to Harvard did not. So,
Interesting. Yeah, you need proof, transparency. So with the community, like with Web3, there's a bit of like, I guess you could say sort of like there's pockets, right? There's social media communities. There's ones that are embedded into your business, private communities that I think are leader led, and then there's also what community, which is the community itself has a life of its own, and then maybe even DAO, which is totally decentralized completely. Where do you sit in terms of like what do you think is for a business like when they hear community? There's a big spectrum. Where do you see most businesses like landing?
yeah, and I think the key on that is to, you may have several different communities within a business, but the key for any community to be successful is to have kind of a central goal that everyone who is in that community knows that this is our purpose. This is why we're here. This is what we're trying to accomplish, whether it's, just to stay educated about new areas of marketing. That's like Mark's community is all focused on how can we be as relevant to the marketing landscape as possible by paying attention to everything that's going on and how that affects our capability to be marketers. And Joe's community is the same thing with content creators, content entrepreneurs. you know where can you go to connect with other people who share your goal and your vision, and to know that you have other experts in there who you can rely on to give you, valuable information. And I'm in an Ed3 DAO, which is a DAO that's all focused on educating educators about Web3 so that they can then educate the next generation who will hopefully be able to use Web3 to change the way that we educate people. And, those are people who are creating all these collaborations and all this networking that's going on within the group just because they've all been connected in there, and they're not, it's different than a lot of paid memberships or paid communities that you go into, and it feels very transactional. Feels like I gave you this, I should receive this. And then if you feel like you're not involved enough, then you're not getting your value out of it. Or you feel like if you're not getting enough, then the creator is not delivering enough value to you. So a lot of these Web3 communities, I like the idea of the tokenization or the NFT that gives you access to the community, that lifetime access. Um, Joe has done that with his conference. He's got conference tickets that you can buy lifetime access to any of his events. So I got one of those, and within the first year of getting it, and I think it was about 3 times the price of the actual conference attendance at the time. Um, and within the first year, I felt like I had gotten more than the value out of that lifetime ticket just from the networking opportunities that he created for all the people that, went and purchased that ticket. And then the additional access to him, the additional value that he offered up in his community. So it's an interesting new model that I think people are going to figure out how to really leverage and really create these um, strong groups of like-minded people focused on the same goals. And we're going to see, um, I think we're going to see a lot of initiatives that are going to really rely heavily on, building that community and creating those connections.
The optimist in me is all over it. I love it. However, I invested heavily in a community recently and got lifetime access, and I thought it was on the blockchain. Thought my NFT and all, and I actually got revoked as one of the biggest holders of the NFT and on the exchange of currency. Realized my liquidity is just getting bled out. I had no recourse.
Right.
And for people that are listening to this, like when someone says lifetime, how do we know? How can somebody? I guess they do your own research, but I mean, it sort of seems to me like we're gonna maybe go through a rough patch before it really becomes a little more smooth sailing. Where do you sit in terms of like where are we at with this? Because there is a lot of resentment and a lot of mistrust going on right now, and myself included. And I'm the one that's like I want to go. I'm like fully optimistic, like so optimistic it's not even funny, and I'm getting burned.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I've done my homework.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing a lot of that, and a lot of that comes back to, I mean, during the NFT heyday, there were a lot of projects out there where the project founders, you didn't even know who they were. They were undocumented, right? Undoxed. Um, I think we're seeing fewer and fewer people who are willing to play at that space or to get involved in projects where they don't know the founders, they don't know the long-term goals, they don't trust them, they haven't seen other projects that they've, been part of. And one of the things that and Joe was actually the one that asked me what I knew about NFTs back in 2020, and I was like, nothing really. And so he's like, "I'll look into it," and that's what got me going deep into the rabbit hole. Um, and at the time, I knew that this was, you know, not new technology. Blockchain chain's been around, but new applications, new use cases, people trying and experimenting. And so anytime you're in that space, and we're seeing it with AI right now, there's a ton of AI startups that are, booming all over the place, but a lot of those are not going to last. A lot of the use cases are not there. So you got to know in this experimentation phase that any money that you put in, you might not get out, which,
Then it's also like the big hype cycle, right? We're
yeah,
in the trough of disillusionment right now with you Web3. Now everybody's moved the hype over to AI.
that's right. That's right. People are easy to jump on that upswell.
Totally.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
paddling into a wave that looks good and then it, just fizzles out. So,
It's funny because I actually thought I was late to the game to Web3. I was part of Gary Vee's 4D program,
mhm,
which you paid to have access to him, and I did that in 2017, and then was alumni, and they'd have these videos, like the meetups and stuff,
right.
and I remember he had this thing going, "Hey, this is for the 4Ds. You're getting early access to this thing, and it's called V Friends." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll go what?" And then it was like the sketches that were in cartoon. I'm like, "I'm not giving you $200 for these sketches." Like I literally
Uh,
left the webinar, and I was just like, "This is like Gary's kind of lost his mind, right?" So I'm in a meetup. I don't know, it was a year later, and someone goes, "I sold mine for $36,000." And in that moment, I was like, "I've been asleep at the wheel." So I ran into Web3 in February, and just did a deep dive in, and I thought I was late to the game, and realizing we're still not even at the end of the first inning here.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah. We're still in the, we're just coming out of the pets.com cycle, that e-commerce went through where you had
totally.
all of these huge e-commerce solutions coming out. And then, fairly soon into the process, you start seeing which ones actually have, sustainability and a life cycle and a good business plan. And, it really goes back to the strategy, the overall strategy and goals of the, community or the project. Um, and then how the leadership, handles things like that. I'm working on a Web3 project, doing some consulting right now for a healthcare organization looking to use it for fundraising. And they're like, "Oh, we just want to create some NFTs and sell them and do some fundraising. I'm like, that's not a sustainable business model anymore. You have to think bigger. You have to think about what's your strategy, what's your goal, how are you helping people solve their problems by providing them, access to a community or opportunities to engage or things like that. So it really all goes back to, to that strategy.
Yeah, when you say the word sustainable, that's where my ears perk up right quick. Like, and I think about what's that?
Yep. Yep. I didn't say anything.
Oh, I was gonna say, what you mentioned about the tech and the goals. The one thing I might add to that is ethics
Yeah.
and track record, and I think that that's where the technology is gonna maybe catch up, like you mentioned with, like, people pretending to have their Harvard business degree, like, where you're gonna have, like, maybe a on the blockchain, some sort of ethics score and, like, credibility of, like, going back or whatever, and like I say, I think things are get worse before they get better, but I think that that is where it's gonna be sustainable. If people are thinking about more about, is this sustainable? Is it ethical? Is it helping people? Or are we just doing a transaction?
Right.
I think that that is what we're shifting toward, in my own opinion. That's what I think we're in this disruptive time where the technology hasn't caught up to kind of making that almost like the promise of blockchain, where it's like it's a secured engagement in some way.
Yeah. And, looking at AI has created so many issues around copyright and ownership.
Oh my gosh.
I was at
Let's
a,
talk about that. Let's just go. You stepped on a landmine. AI with copy and content. How does someone do content marketing in the world of AI?
so there was actually a fantastic presentation. Jules Dudko did a presentation on using blockchain. So, what if you could create your digital identity that would be, verifiable, live on the blockchain? Any content that you put out would be stamped with your digital identity. So it would be provable that that is your content. Then let's say AI comes, scrapes your content and produces it. Now it would have to cite you as part of the contributors to that particular piece of AI generated content. And then if someone else does a deep fake of one of your podcasts and puts it up on YouTube, you'll see that it's not verified. It's not stamped. It's like the blue check mark, but
Mhm.
actual on the blockchain, verifiable, and not controlled by Elon.
Yeah, totally. And so when you think about that, like, I think that's where technology is going. I like the book I'm writing. I'm already writing the book. It's called Title Shift, and it's about how we're leaving the age of attention, like likes, comments, and every this whole transactional pay attention. You probably, if you read my book, I kind of like allude to it at the end of the book, and I believe we're moving this age of trust.
Yeah,
We're going to go through this like title shift where it's kind of, and we're in this like soupy mess. But the age of trust, I have a really hopeful, optimistic outlook, because I think that the more mistrusting, the more BS that goes on with all this stuff, AI and the sea of sameness that's going to create, it's going to push technology to a need for creators to protect their IP, for companies to protect their IP, and this breadcrumb trail of that was scraped and you have to attribute it, no different than we do as authors making a reference in the back, right? Like I think
yeah,
that that is there's a it just has the technology hasn't caught up to the volume yet. But I think if you how could somebody preemptively protect their IP in this in between phase, do you think?
yeah. It's really tricky. I think the biggest thing we can do as creators is just to have a unique voice and personalize our content that we're putting out so that it's more difficult. Someone be able to look at a piece of your content that you put out and said, "Oh, that's computer generated. That's not actually Scott," because we know what Scott sounds like. We know what his, not only just his voice and his facial expressions, but how what his thought patterns are and how he actually feels about particular issues. And I think you know, taking stances on things and expressing your personal viewpoints about things, I think is going to become more and more important. And people are going to want more of that because they're going to want that trust. They're going to want that person that they can relate to and rely on who is on their side. You know,
Mhm.
I think,
Yeah, that through line, that's interesting, because if you think of, if you do a chat, prompt and it gives you the information, it's sort of like, it's just information. It doesn't have that sort of that tilt, right?
right.
Or doesn't have that, center point. Like for me, it's like if you read my book, it's totally like a conversational. I had to argue with a little bit with the editor. I'm like, I want it to sound like me, and two, I don't want it to be like super, wordy in terms of like tech words. I want to make it simplified, and three, I want to have a little bit of that surf flavor, but I want the through line to always be around: is it sustainable? Is it about, because to me, it's like my book is sustainable growth marketing. That's what I'm really focused on. That's the through line. Like that's what I'm standing for, if you will. So I wonder if AI can replicate that in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a conversation with Ann Handley, and she was we were talking about AI, and I went into ChatGPT and said, write an introduction to a presentation about this in the style of Ann Handley, and showed it to her, and she was like, "Oh yeah, that I can see how that kind of sounds like me. It's scraping enough of that data. She has enough content out there that it can actually replicate some of, her expressions and sayings." But when you listen to one of her presentations or you read one of her newsletters, there are stories embedded in there that AI cannot create that same type of story and connection, and the way that she builds those stories to reveal the larger idea that she's trying to communicate. That's where you can look at it and go, there's no way that AI can, certainly not at the point that AI is at now, but there's no way that AI could generate that same content. So that that's coming from her authentically, and it's not being, generated.
So I love that, because storytelling community, those are two antidotes. Because if I think about, this is going to happen, tell me if you believe this is going to happen. We're going to see an author that's going to rise, and they're going to be hailed as the next marketing, guru, and they never wrote the book. They don't know anything. They just know how to make prompts.
That's right. That's right. Well, prompt engineer is now a job title. I've seen many job requests looking for prompt engineers, but that's one of the things I liked about your book a lot is you and your whole brand. You embrace that connection to surfing, to the water. You use those analogies, and they flow through your content, and the stories that you embed in there are authentically you. So those are the kinds of things that, as you're reading the book, there's no way that a AI could have those experiences or know those things.
Yeah, I think that vanilla, do this top 10 things. I think that's going to be where we're going to see a proliferation. Now, we're listening to this. We're going to read your book, maybe even read my book, and I'm going to go out and build a community. How do I either leverage AI to do content marketing or create content to protect myself so that I create some differentiation?
Yeah. So, I mean, leveraging AI, I'm talking with a lot of creators and businesses, higher ed and beyond, who are using AI to great advantage. So, ideation, AI is fantastic with helping you remember things that you forgot to do. So if I'm going to do a presentation, I'll come up with my outline, and then I'll go into ChatGPT or Bard and say, write me an outline for this presentation. And I'll look at it and be like, oh, well, here's something that I forgot to include. Or yeah, maybe I like the way that they've organized this better than the way that I organized it. Um, and a lot of content creators are using it to, generate questions for podcast interview. I think a lot of podcasters are really finding, some great use out of AI tools. I know Descript is a great tool to help you automate a lot of
We're
your process.
totally using Decrypt right now.
See? Yeah,
Oh my
because
gosh, it totally is changing everything for also clips,
yeah,
like just getting like rapid clips. So I just
such
gonna
a time
interject a little bit.
saver.
My wife I've got about 25 hours of production with a guy named Guru Singh.
Hmm.
Do you know who that
Oh
is?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So Guru Singh and I, we did a couple podcasts. They kind of took off crazy, and we've been producing this thing called the Mindful Marketer, about how you can sort of integrate nature, spirituality, and different thinking into your marketing, in your business and your growth. And anyway, so my wife was producing it, and she was using Otter and transcript and different things. She found this Descript, total game changer.
Yeah.
Production cost of what we were doing because of that one AI innovation is like, it makes that 25-hour production from a really big investment to like fractional. We
Yeah.
can like, and she can do it. She doesn't even know how, she's never even touched an editing tool.
Yeah, it's
Like,
amazing. I'm seeing it all the time in, data analysis. You're able to push large amounts of data into these tools and have it create summaries for you about it without you having to manually go through or create visualizations. It'll just tell you, "Here are the key takeaways." You have to go back and verify them, obviously, but yeah, it's amazing the amount of, uh, workflow processes that you can automate or streamline based on, using these different tools.
the one she did that was just to show me. She says it took her like 2 minutes. She searched the words ha 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 because me and him laugh all the time, and then she made an edit of every time we were laughing back and forth and what we were saying. It's the most. I'll send it to you, Brian. It's like maybe in the show notes I'll have a link to it. It's absolutely hilarious, and but she did like in like minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, and imagine how long that would have taken her to go through manually
Oh,
because you have to listen to it
unimaginable.
all, right? Yeah.
So that brings me to this other concept. You mentioned it before. I didn't want to interrupt you with your flow. It's the idea of this. Is community the future of content marketing and possibly I don't know how where AI would fit in this, but collaboration. One of the things that I believe is we're entering this new era of the collaboration economy because, like you saw the book, like Mark Schaefer did, and you were involved in. That's a collaboration. You're now collaborating with Joe. I think that what with Web three with tech, where's your stand on it? Because for me, I'm like, I don't think I think this is going to be a tsunami and it's going to make it super interesting because now AI that'll be another, in my opinion, an antidote for AI because it's like um, peanut butter, like Reese's Pieces. Like you couldn't have imagined it until you did it, and
Yeah.
no AI could have probably like I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, tell me
Yeah.
what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, there are already brands that are I mean, Nike is doing this with, its swoosh community where you can go in and design virtual sneakers and, depending on how popular they are, they may end up producing those sneakers. So now they have community members who are coming together to create product for them that then they can go sell and the community member might get a piece of it, you know? So, yeah, I definitely think brands are gonna start seeing the power of these collaborations, within their community, and I think it applies across so many different markets. I mean, just looking at education, the opportunity for, colleges and universities to create these communities that span a global network of potential people who are all interested in pursuing one, solving one problem or pursuing one specific activity or reaching one particular goal. I think if we could get, researchers from across the world working on some of our biggest problems and collaborating, sharing ideas, sharing resources, specialized equipment that they don't all have access to. Yeah, I think it's a game changer for sure.
One of the things that I'm visualizing is unexpected collaborations. So you think of the Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart, right? That's
Yeah,
in marketing. It creates that like literally like the tilt. It could never been done with anyone else. And you think of what else like Gene Simmons in content marketing. Like what could that be, right? Like
yeah,
I think that that is going to make for highly differentiated and highly interesting stuff that people haven't thought of. And I think so many people are a little bit overwhelmed and feel like almost like I can never win the AI and all these things, and I can never catch my breath. And I'm like, actually, I think what's going to do it might free you up to do things that we have not even seen creatively.
yeah.
What have you seen in terms of this as like where the tilt or the content or things that maybe people haven't even couldn't even imagine, but you have like more of a maybe like a pulse on that could help people visualize that. I think I'm maybe I'm the optimist. I think it's actually gonna be cooler in the future. Like more creators are gonna be able to create more stuff in a really cool way.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I think that we're gonna be able to step back from a lot of the mundane routine things that suck up so much of our time and really focus on the things that AI can't do well, and that's that creativity, the being creative, really thinking about big picture, looking at, the entire strategy behind what you're doing and why you're doing it. Um, just being in some of these communities and the way that people share in there, share projects that they're working on or share ideas that they have, people in, completely separate industries in completely separate spaces are involved in these conversations and they're like, oh my gosh, this is a perfect use case for this other project that we're working on or this other problem that we're trying to solve. And I think creating those connections, and we know scientifically they've proven that, more diverse networks of people come up with better solutions. And I think creating these communities, especially at this global scale, we're going to end up with, I think some incredible creative solutions and changes in how our culture views trust.
So again, leaning into your book is, the if I think about community, could we keep going back a little bit to community because there's something there. And the piece that I think I'm interested to hear a little bit more about where we sit together or apart on is in content marketing. I think some people, when they think of content marketing in today's world, it's changed. When Joe started, there was a little bit more of an appetite. Like if you did a blog, you're like, oh wow. When I did my first podcast, it was still very new. But then people jump content, right? They kind of quickly follow the next trend. I'm 5 years in. I'm not going anywhere. I'll podcast if it's an audience one because I just want to talk to you. It's like I'm actually scratching my own itch. Like legitimately, I'm like, I'm not here because I'm going, hey, I hope Brian will be really good for my audience. I mean, I hope that happens, but I actually want to get to know you, right? Like, so I'm scratching my own itch. But I'm thinking about community, the economic waste that happens sometimes with content marketing where people feel exhausted of the treadmill. To me, I feel like what content marketing can do and the like you said, like sort of changing the hierarchy of it, right? The thing about community is economic waste starts going down because you're having a captive audience. They're not like being distracted. They're not like all these other things like and that's more sustainable. What do you think in terms of like sustainability with content marketing? Like where do you see like it's sort of leaning into the theme of my podcast, with sustainable growth marketing, helping people really think about sustainability. Where do you see those big inflection points with what your current understanding is and what you've been experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I love about content marketing is it's all about putting out content that's going to help people solve their problems. So we're going to need that. I mean, there will always be people with problems. There will always be people looking for solutions. So there will always be a need for content marketing. I think the delivery methods are going to change dramatically over the next 5, 10 years for sure. I think AR and VR, I think the metaverse is going to change the way that we create content. I think we're seeing some of that just with, all the big media companies that are, originally they all decided to launch their own platforms and just throw a whole bunch of money into content that wasn't sustainable. It's not a sustainable model. So now they're all pulling back and trying to figure out what's really working and where to invest their money. I think when technology gets to the point and adoption gets to the point where we're all starting to play more in these virtual spaces, we're really going to be looking at content marketing as experiences. You're not just going to, uh, create uh, a shop that somebody can go in to buy a surfboard. You're going to give them the opportunity to virtually take that out into the ocean and try it out and, see how it works before they actually invest in the physical product. So I think it's going to be a mind shift, but I think it all goes back to consistently helping people solve their problems. And if you're the person or the brand that is offering that opportunity and you're allowing them, giving them free information to help them make a decision or choose a product or a solution that's not necessarily yours, that's where you're gonna, build that trust and they're gonna recognize that.
Oh yeah, I love where you're going with that experiences with content. Okay, so now we're talking. I mean, I are you familiar with Joe Pine's work with experience economy?
Now,
Yeah, I mean, you probably
I
really
l
love that. So I'm actually got certified in experience design, and in my book, I describe, how we actually move from experiences to transformations as being sort of one of the most powerful growth loops that you can create. And experiences are like really interesting because people are willing to pay so much more for experiences. And a lot of times when people think of experiences, they think of the only experience is when I deliver something, like at the end result. Like it's like where I think what you just kind of like hit like a little interesting landmine for me is yes, like content marketing, what if that was part of the experience? Like it kind of, my thing is like, why can't business be more beautiful? Like, why does marketing have to be so interruptive and annoying and crappy? And sometimes when people are trying to do serving you with educational content, you kind of feel like it's a bait and switch. Like they're doing it to kind of roll you in.
Right.
But if we kind of shift that going, hey, it's an experience no matter what. And that's how you experience my brand. And it's helping you. It's like you have that feeling, the feeling you have of an experience, that I think is super interesting for content marketing. Because then it's like you're not going, I'm trying to create, so there's an energy, right? Like energy of like, I'm creating content to get you to move over here, move energy. But what if that was the first point and that was your deliverable in terms of the experience you felt great about as a brand? And it was like the connection of to translate that content into a monetization. It doesn't feel like like you got me,
Right.
or okay, I'll play along, or and what I mean by that is like you say you're going to create this ebook, and you just want my email to then market to me, right? It's what do you like? What do you like in terms of experience? Like where do you sit with what I'm describing there? Because I think that's an exciting outcome of the proliferation of like content that we're going to be seeing.
Yeah, and I think the whole point with content marketing is to eventually get that customer to convert somehow. Whether it's just, moving the next step down your funnel or subscribing to your newsletter or taking you know, some reciprocity, feeling like they're paying you back for that content that they've created, but it's never like an expected thing. It doesn't come as a big pitch. It's not the big reveal at the end of the video that never seems to end. And then you get to the end, it's like, oh, this is a whole sales pitch. Um, it's a very subtle, it's just there. We'll do it a lot of times in our content at the university where we'll just provide a link to, one of our academic programs or something like that. But we're never like pushing that message throughout the entire piece of content. It's just if you want to progress, if you want to take the next step, if you want to, come on this journey with us, then you can do it here. It's just an option. And I think it's going to be the same thing with those experiences where you're going to give them options to take the next step, to explore further, to, book a appointment at a real store to come check out the actual product. Um, or you can just go look at another product or go over to another brand site even. We're going to have these opportunities for brands to even collaborate between them. There are going to be these partnerships that are going to come up through brands being in other brands communities. I think we're going to see, yeah, a lot of different opportunities in the way that people think about marketing and selling.
Yeah, because the part of the experience, if they feel the experience was you got me, this was just a sales, that's like it's not time well spent, right?
Right.
Where he describes like if you go to Disneyland, you want to be at an experience. It's like I don't even want to leave, right? It's such a good experience, and having that is where does the collaboration become not a great experience if the intention or the idea of like in the influence, the collapse of influencers, right? Like, oh, you don't really love that brand, you're just doing it because you're making a transaction. Like I think that is where I believe that the real strategy could be, in content marketing is collaborations, because it adds more value where you're sending them.
Yeah, where you're looking for influencers who are actually users of that product or service, not people who you can pay to say that they use it because you're paying them. I think that's where you're going to get back into that trust issue. And a lot of people will, um, once they get a sponsorship, they'll reveal, okay, I am sponsored by this company, but I used this product exclusively before I was sponsored or something so that that they're not just doing it for the payment.
Yeah, I mean, my community, like for example, your book and what you guys are doing. I mean, nobody does it better. Why would I recreate it? I would just focus on my tilt on it. And by the way, there's the blueprint. Go there, and so that I become the trusted voice and agnostic. I think that is where I think some people get tripped up in the transaction because they feel like they need to make a transaction at every point, and I get that to a degree. But when you're doing it because of hey, this is actually adding value to the experience, right?
Right.
That's where I think the content collaboration and stuff that you're talking about. Um, I want to shift because and we got to kind of wrap up soon. Is I'm actually have a unique opportunity because you've read my book. Do you mind if we talk a little bit about that,
Yeah,
just
yeah, not
slightly?
at all.
because I think there's a connection here, the big one. In fact, I know there is, because I totally love Joe's work. I've been like, I mean, I look at my body of work I've done, and I couldn't have been a success with it without his guidance in his book about creating content. And I've just kind of take my tilt on it, right, which is around really focusing on impact creators.
Right.
And I was curious for you, first of all, what is a groundswell? Like when you hear the word groundswell, what is that? What's your definition of a groundswell?
Well, and I love the way that it's a growing process, and you put that in your book with your, um, the build, give, grow, transform. It's,
Hmm.
coming from nothing and growing up to this, um, this big crescendo, this tidal wave, this tsunami of value that you're adding. And it's, I love kind of the organic feel that you have throughout your whole book. You relate things back to surfing, which is something you're passionate about, and there are so many incredible metaphors in the book that come through, and it feels very authentic. It feels very conversational, coming from a corporate institutional marketing background. I have been very hesitant to introduce some of my hobbies into my content. Um, but more people who I have talked to say, no, do that, leverage that. You have a unique perspective that you can bring in because of your experiences. And that's what people are looking for. So yeah, that, going back to the groundswell, it's starting from a base level and looking for opportunities to build and grow the same way, a wave does. It starts off flat when you look out in the ocean, and then as it comes in closer to the ground, that's when it starts building and growing. It's the same thing with, your marketing messages. It's content marketing. You start putting out that content, and it's patience and it's persistence and it's continuing to grow and build until eventually it becomes this wave of trust that sweeps people up and carries them along.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's like when you mentioned super fans, that's I believe is my category of people that have been transformed. They're like, I don't want to do any marketing, anything like this, or this is my place, or these are my people, or this is where I belong, or one of the places I belong. I think it's too much to say like you're either in one community or the next. I think any leader that has that sort of defiance is like missing the boat.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
There's
And so I don't see any other a community as a competitor. I want to actually collaborate.
right.
Like because I see that sort of ecosystems like my community. Imagine how my community and your community, Brian, like we could work together and we share some common values. We share a vision of trying to create something better, not economic waste, making a difference for the world. Like that to me is like better than going out into the universe and trying to create content or marketing and advertising to kind of get people in, where now we can serve them and then move quicker. And I think that we're going to see like almost like cells
Mhm.
collaborating, and it's going to be, and I've been trying to think about this a lot about the net, what's after community. I think community is kind of like there isn't much after that, but I do think collaboration and acceleration through collabing or connecting, almost as if we're a strip mall of like-minded people of values, you know what I mean, or something like that. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of what's in my head.
Yeah, and, I see a lot more. Like, we know that there are a lot of brands now who see the value of creators and media properties, and there are a lot of brands that are buying newsletters or buying podcasts to be able to connect them to their audiences. I think we're going to start seeing that with communities. That brands are going to look for communities with similar interests who they can offer these collaboration opportunities with, or who they can partner with, or try to leverage some of those. But it's going to be very tricky for community managers and community owners to make sure that whatever that collaboration turns into starts from that foundation of trust, that you're getting involved with something with someone who has your best interests at heart and just isn't trying to sell you something.
Yeah, and I would maybe add one more thing, which I've learned is, are they going to stick around? See,
Right.
do I think that Joe Paluzzi is going to stick around? Do I think you're going to stick around? Yes. right? Like that is another factor that I've seen over my 30 years and seen people come and go, and people that say they're marketers and they're like a marketer for a minute,
Right.
am I going to go anywhere? Like my Groundswell's going nowhere. Like this is my lifelong thing, right? That might have another factor is like, I think that the people who, like, there's so many people that get kind of, I don't want to speak to the person that's listening. It's like, it's kind of a bit downtrodden about it's not quite working. And it's just like, there's like this slow, I would just say keep on keeping on, because there's another factor when you kind of stay at it and continue with content marketing, building your community, it can sometimes be very slow, right?
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
But it's
absolutely.
worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Freedom. It's about freedom, right?
that's right. Yeah, and the payoff, that trust. I mean, building trust is not a quick process. It definitely takes time, and we know that from, from our relationships. You're not going to meet somebody and immediately trust them, hand them your wallet or, trust them with things. But in a lot of these, transactional situations, that's what it comes down to is I go shopping at this brand and they say that they can do this and I give them their money. And then I find out later that it doesn't deliver like that. But if they're look at Patagonia, this great content, creating amazing products and super sustainable and, you know, got to such a point where, the company was given to the people, to the employees. So that's that kind of trust. And that's that long term, if you find creators, marketers who are in this long term, they're not going to just, disappear when you turn around.
Right. That is the litmus test. Will they stand behind their word? Will they make good if they have to make change?
Right.
Right. And are they going to play the long game, not stepping over dollars to pick up pennies in transactions,
Right.
even at a loss? And I know there's so many people building community, and they're listening to this, and I just want them to feel like you can build your groundswell, you can build your super fans, building your content engine, because it is sustainable and it's worth it.
Yeah,
You just got to
absolutely.
keep moving on. I think that's why you want to be in communities like yours and mine, is so that you have people that can give you hope, and you can have and accelerate because you can close the gap.
Right. And someone that can be there to say, keep going, keep doing this. You're doing the right thing. It just takes time. It's just a long process to get people to trust you and believe in you.
Yeah, I think you build a really big reputation for yourself. Like, you're so even keeled. I'm one of your super fans, just if you don't know already, that's why you're here. And I thank you so much for being on the show. I have one unique question for you, and that is, you mentioned earlier that someone told you should bring your passion into your business. What is a passion you're actually thinking about bringing in your business? Because I would love to hear what that is.
So I have been a skydiver for the last 33 years. And I've been an
Mhm.
instructor for the last 25 years, teaching other people how to jump out of airplanes and fly wingsuits and do all that. My daughter actually just made her first tandem skydive last weekend. So yeah, and there's so much crossover between, the same thing that you found with surfing. There's so many connections between skydiving and learning and consistency as there are with content marketing. So I
The
think,
entire process of getting ready for skydiving,
right,
the training required, the tools, the you can't do it alone, all these things.
that's right,
I that
overcoming
would
that
be
fear.
I didn't know that, by the way. And I think
Yeah.
it would be absolutely love if you actually leaned into that. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, so I think, I will, and you have, talk about superfans. I love what you're doing. I really enjoyed your book, and I love the way that you just integrate your passion into everything that you do, and I think that just speaks volumes to, who you are and how authentic you are, so
Oh,
appreciate it.
thank you. I really appreciate that, man. Where can people find you if you want to just send them so that they can follow your community yourself? Where would you like to send them?
BrianWPiper.com, and then I'm Brian W. Piper on almost every social channel.
Dude, it's been a total honor. This is fantastic. Like every show, I like to end it with a really good shaka. Um, yeah, give me the perfect. Thank you so much. And I think that we have multiple episodes we could probably create. We just scratched the surface. Again, you got to grab anyone that's listening, you got to grab the second edition of Epic Content Marketing. And if you're listening today, thank you so much for being a listener. Join the community at Groundswell Inner Circle. There's a free area, so you can go check it out. And if you want to talk to me and leave me a little bit of information and give something pass on to Brian here, just go to groundswell.fm, and there's a little link there. You can speak into the speak pipe there and leave me a message, and I'll respond right away. And until next time, mahalo.